97 miles of a board track. Now that made the speeds increase because of the smoothness.
What was the length of the 2x4s?
I would assume they were normal sized 2x4s, but they were like 2 inches wide. Again, I don't know. All right, now if anyone's ever heard of early racing, they've probably heard of this guy. This is Barney Oldfield. Now Barney Oldfield came to town in 1915. He was supposed to be here in 1912, but he didn't show up. Now Barney Oldfield was more of a showman than he was a race car driver. He was the first man to do 60 miles an hour. And he said in his quotes, in his books, he said that he couldn't breathe at 60 miles an hour with so much pressure. That's Barney Oldfield. But Barney Oldfield, when he came to town in 1915, he brought 3 cars with him. 1 that he was going to try and set a world record with, 2 that he wanted to race an airplane with around the track, and 3 the one he wanted to race in the race. So on Friday night, before the races, he got out his Fiat Cyclone. There's the Fiat Cyclone. And he raced that against an airplane. Now, he always won this airplane. And that's because it was rigged. But it was close. I mean, he came in at the last second and beat the airplane. So, but anyway, he was quite a showman. He really was. And this is the car that he raced the airplane with. Now, there's his cars. I'll show you what they are. First of all, there's his race car, which is a Peugeot. There's the Fiat Cyclone. And this is the front-wheel drive Christie. This thing was death on wheels. And that's what he tried to set a world record with. And he did. He did. Now, the interesting thing about world records in early speed was that they were for everything. I mean, it was, well, you had the fastest quarter mile, you had the fastest half mile, you had the fastest 3/4 miles, you had the fastest mile and a quarter. And everywhere he'd go, he'd set a new world record. And one of the papers back here shows one of his world records that he. Now, does anybody know what that is? The Ford Supply Company is not for Ford automobiles, but for Firestone tires. This is where the County City building is now. It's on 9th and Tacoma Avenue. Now, here's another shot of that. The Ford Supply Company is right there. Now, this is the famous saying that Barney Oldfield came up with, "My only life insurance, Firestone tires." I mean, an advertising exec would love to have that because it really put Firestone tires on the map. My only life insurance. This is the front-wheel drive Christie, and it was a horrible automobile, but he actually set a world record with it.
How do you spell Christie?
Christie.
Okay, are they the same outfit that built the front of the fire engine?
You got it, same outfit. All right, this is Barney Oldfield in his Peugeot. Now, if you look at his face, you see like he's got his mouth open. That actually is not his mouth, that's his cigar. And the reason it's his cigar is because a few years earlier, he got into some really bad wrecks, and he chipped his teeth. And so when he raced, his teeth would vibrate because the tracks were so horrible. So he put that cigar in his mouth as a shock absorber. All right. This is a Mercer Raceabout. One fine automobile. And you're asking me, why is that picture here? Well, if anybody knows what the picture is, that's up at Wright Park, by the way. Okay. This, in 1915, was the first pace car at Tacoma. Before that, they would offset them, and they'd send them out every 15, 20, 30 seconds. But in 1915, they decided to have a running start like Indianapolis. And this is Ted Betts's Mercer Raceabout. His nephew still is alive and had some great photographs of this Mercer Raceabout. Got it out of Chicago, he was telling me. He also got in a wreck with it in Driveway Lake Drive and dumped it and shoved the 1912 or 13 Cadillac off the road, and I'm getting off the subject. All right, there's the Mercer. Here's the start of the 1915 races. Now, remember, this is Earl Cooper has won the 13 and the 14, and he wins this, he gets that big trophy. Well, he doesn't do it. And here Earl Cooper is in town, and there's his 3 cars. There's his new 8 race car, and there's the 2 earlier ones that he had. And he brought all 3 of them to town to race. And he came in 2nd place. Interesting story about this car. This is called the Great Big Baked Potato Special. The reason it's called that, does anybody know the Northern Pacific had this, what did they have? They had that in their,
Cellar in their dining.
their dining car, they had it, the Great Big Baked Potato Special. And so they sponsored this car, and when they sponsored it, they had to call it the Great Big Baked Potato Special. This car once belonged to Jimmy Parsons. This is the car in 1915 that the Northern Pacific bought to use for the 1915 race. However, this was the winner of this trophy back here. They just changed it a little bit, so.
Guy had fallen in by some years.
I don't know. I don't know who was related to him. This is Eddie Pullen. Eddie Pullen just came off of winning the grand prize at Santa Monica Speedway. And this great, big, huge Mercer. Now, he attributes it to his lucky charm, which is his daughter's shoe right there. So he's quite an interesting fellow. Okay, now this is Ulysses Aubrey, and you guys can see, recognize the building behind it. Now Ulysses Aubrey, by the way, this is the guy that owns the Mercer. Built this car in Tacoma, and he was going to race it, and he's got a specially built 4-cylinder Stutz Wisconsin engine for it. He got all the top of the line, cutting edge racing parts for it. He built this car, and he was going to do a great job in Tacoma. And he painted it all up, and there's stories about this car that, you know, this is what's going to put Tacoma racing, and this is the car that's going to do it. Well, not quite. All right, now, this is Coal Oil Billy Carlson. Coal Oil got his name because he used to run kerosene in his race cars. And if you've ever got behind a burning kerosene car, that's why. Even after he went back to gas, they still called him Coal Oil. Now the problem was this. This was a great, great race car, and Billy Carlson was a wonderful, wonderful race car driver. And he was in 2nd place at the time. And he had 2 tires blow at the same time. Bad luck. Both Billy Carlson and his mechanic were killed. This is the first fatality at the Tacoma Speedway. Very, very sad. Ray Haroon, who was the first Indianapolis Speedway winner, was the head of the Maxwell racing team, and he pulled all Maxwells out of racing, and there was 6 or 8 of them around the country that were racing. And after this fatality, he pulled them out of racing. Okay, here's your winner. Grover Ruxtall, 1915. Now, does that name ring a bell to some of you people who have Model Ts?
Sure.
Okay, well, after he got out of racing, he went and he built Model T 2-speed Ruxtall rear ends. And he did very well. He also hired Eddie Pullen, who you just saw a picture of earlier, who was another Mercer teammate, to work with him. Great race car. Now, this is the year that most people want to forget about in Tacoma Speedway, and that's 1916. We'll get into why they want to in a moment. The Speedway Association decided to have 3 races in 1916. First, they were going to have a Memorial Day Classic, and then they were going to have the 4th of July, and then they were going to have this one on August 5th. Now, the Memorial Day Classic, in 1916, you got to look at what's going on in 1916. First of all, Seattle hated Tacoma. Tacoma hated Seattle. And so what were really big at this time were grudge races. So here we go again. Here's Ulysses Aubrey and the Tacoma favorite. And number 8, which is now Jimmy Parsons. Now this is Earl Cooper's number 8, that cheater. He bought Earl Cooper's number 8 race car. You know, the winningest race car in the U.S. history, Jimmy Parsons bought, because Jimmy Parsons lived in Seattle. So they were going to have this grudge race between the 14 car and the 8 car. So that was that. What happened, of course, was Tacoma won. What else? All right, now, I have pictures, but I've had to cut this down, of the July 4th race, because let me tell you what happened in July 4th. Seattle couldn't handle it. So they wanted a rematch. So they scheduled July 4th. They had this big, you know, everything in the paper. I got them back here saying, you know, we're going to have Jimmy Parsons go back at Ulysses Aubrey, and we're going to have a great, great event. They also had on the program a Fat Man race, which meant that they had these people with their Detroit cars, or what you want to call them at that time, and they had them on the track, and they were 100 yards down the track. So these men all have to weigh 200 pounds or more, raced 100 yards to their car. Got in their car and then raced around the track once. And that was the Fat Man race. They then had the women's race. And the women's race was really interesting. They didn't really race the cars. They just drove the cars. Now, if the women stalled the car, they got a few points taken off. If they ground the gears, they got a few more points taken off. If they hit somebody, they got a lot of points taken off. And they had 2 women's races. I guess that they were so much fun, I guess, that they had 2 of them that day. Now, in the middle of this track, you remember this is a 2-mile oval, so they had a whole mile inside the track. So they put a mile of railroad track, and they put 1 engine at one end of it, and 1 engine at the other end of it, and they were going to have this great big collision. But first of all, they were going to have the race between Jimmy Parsons and Ulysses Aubrey. Well, Jimmy Parsons' wonderful Stutz number 8 cracked a piston just before the race. So, again, Seattle loses. So they had a problem. So what they did is they went out to these trains and they painted Tacoma on one of them. They went to the other one and painted Seattle on it. And then they smashed them into each other. Now, what happened was the Tacoma train had 1 wheel off the track. So Seattle said they won. Now, there weren't any auto races that day. So the people in the grandstands here were mad, to say the least. They wanted their money back. And so what Jimmy Parsons and Ulysses Aubrey said, well, we'll have a race